welcome to the Lead Generation World Podcast with your host, Michael Ferree. That would be me. Thank you for joining us today. This is our third installment of the Lead Generation World Podcast, and we've got a lot of good things planned for future podcasts. But if you haven't listened to the first couple ones, feel free to check us out on leadgenerationworld.com or the SoundCloud page, and then we'll also be uploading it to our YouTube page as well. More about me, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Michael Ferree. Last name is Ferree. If you're curious to know who the heck I am and want to know more without listening to me talk anymore, you can go to LinkedIn and search me up, and you'll find me there as well. So, yeah, thank you for joining. We got some cool things working on our side. We're shaping up for the show in January, Lead Generation Show, which is going to be great. We're working on some excellent content right now that's going to be different than anything that's been done before. And as I've said in the past, we're focusing on creating excellent opportunities for all parties of the industry. So that's for buyers, sellers, service providers, you name it. We're going to provide some really, really great opportunities for you to learn and network. And I'm really excited to share those with you. But the time is not right. We got to wait a little bit longer. But for someone myself who's worked with conferences, who've been to a ton of conferences before, and has always had a passion for the lead generation industry, I'm really excited about what's shaping up. So keep an eye out for that. Today, if you might have listened to the music, and you're like, oh man, this music is a little dark. And I thought it was appropriate. We're going to be talking ad fraud today, and ad fraud is a little depressing sometimes. So I got some dark music to intro us in today's show. I don't know. But we're going to be talking about some positives too, because there are solutions out there that help fight ad fraud or spot ad fraud. And we're going to be talking to a longtime industry veteran. And I've said that before on other podcasts, but we're going to bring on Rich Kahn here in a moment. He's going to be joining us in just a few minutes. And Rich has been in the industry for over 26 years on the digital space, and just knows a ton has just a ton of experience in this industry and seeing ad fraud and digital marketing. And so it's going to be really, really great to catch up with him, get a little backstory on his experiences in the industry, and then talk a little bit about ad fraud. I love this stuff. I love hearing about ways and talking with companies that are helping advertisers and buyers, better navigate this industry by identifying the sort of bad actors and the campaigns that are driving down performance. If you have a service or a platform that does that, reach out to me. I'd love to hear about this stuff. I geek out on these types of platforms. So sometimes there are learning experiences too, because I don't know a ton about ad fraud, especially in a ever-changing environment that the digital space is. Ad fraud 5 years ago is different than it is today. So excited to continue to learn, and I hope you guys find it interesting as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on Rich Kahn. Rich is from Anura.io. That's Anura.io. Also has a company called Ezanga. Rich has been in the industry for over 26 years. Is that right, Rich?
That's correct. Started my first marketing firm. This is before the browser came out back in '93.
Yeah. So before we get into everything, I'd love to sort of dig into people's history a little bit and kind of get a feel for your experience in this industry of digital marketing and online or internet. And it shows here you started what is it? Inter Exchange e-magazine. What was that? And that was in 1993.
Yes. So I've always been into computers. I mean, I wrote my first game when I was 9. I got published when I was 12. So I've been developing code and just enthralled with computers in general.
Yeah.
So in 93 is when I found out that you can buy a device, hook it up, and get connected to computers globally versus the old bulletin board systems of the 80s where you could just dial into another, like dial from computer to computer using a phone. In fact, I started my first, what you would call a website. Back then, they used to call them bulletin board services. I think it was 88 is when I started it. I think it was, remember correctly, it was called the Padded Room. And it was just a place that people could meet, swap software, and believe it or not, send email. And it was connected to ARPANET. So what happened back in the day is you would log into the server, you would dial in. I only had 2 lines coming in, so I can only have 2 users at a time on my website, so to speak. And you would dial in, you would send an email, and an email address was an extremely long address. It wasn't like it is today, but it was a really long address. And you would put it in, you'd put in your subject, you put in your body, and hit send. And it would sit on that computer. And once you got off the system at a certain time, it would actually connect. It would drop one of the lines, dial out to another system, the ARPANET network, swap email, send email to that server, and bring in email. And this would happen across the country. And it would take about 5 days to get an email across the country. And if it doesn't happen in a second, everyone gets all upset, right? Nowadays, but back then, just to get a response from somebody from the West Coast with a digital response, through a new system called email was just amazing. So that was back in the 80s. I was still in high school at that time.
And that's almost slower than snail mail.
Oh, depends.
That is amazing. So it had to actually jump from computer to or server to server, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah, because what happened was if you called long distance, remember back then we had long distance charges.
Right.
So people didn't want to, I wasn't going to send your free email long distance for free. Yeah. So a lot of times you'd be able to call in your region for free. So we would dial into a regional center that would get the email, give me an email that I had from my users or take an email that I had from my users. And then it would do the next hop, which was free to its location. And it would just kind of do that. It was a chain of these like many computers that would do this process so this way nobody had to pay anything.
Got it.
It's how you got around the phone companies back in the day, with us hackers back then. But and it was interesting. Now you had the bulletin board systems like AOL was out at the time where you can log in and talk real time, and there were chat boards and stuff like that, or you can use their internal email system as long as you were on AOL, which at the time was you paid by the hour. It was like $5 or $10 an hour to be part of these services. So of course, again, everyone's trying to watch their costs. So our bulletin board system would take email and get it around the network, around the internet. Well, it didn't exist back then, but around ARPANET for free. So people would take advantage of that. It wasn't a big thing because it took so damn long, but heck, it was free and it was new technology that we all got enthralled with. So the internet, as we know it, where all the computers are interconnected, got turned over to us, I guess, from the government, or government gave us access to it, or the initial findings of it. I believe the date September 1st of 1991, if my history's right.
Okay.
So I found out about it 2 years later, and I was like, oh, I'm getting in on this. So I went out and bought a computer, got the modem, got set up, and got connected to it. And it was all text-based. It was all command line interface. There was no browser, no point and click, no hyperlinks. It was just straight text.
What kind of? Do you remember the computer?
Yeah, I still have it. It was a Gateway.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, I kept it. My first desktop machine, first PC, I should say, that I bought.
Yeah.
So it's sitting in the closet. It doesn't work, but I still keep it. Yeah. One of these days, I want to hang it in the wall of my office, along with my first laptop.
Oh, that is so good. That's great. So go ahead. Go ahead with your story.
Yeah. So essentially, I got so enthralled in it. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start. I was talking in chat rooms and I'm like, I love the internet. I'm doing all this research and everyone's like, where are you getting this information from? I'm like, I'm learning how to get around the internet by logging into server to server to server and getting news updates and stuff, but there was no central location for that stuff. Mm-hmm. So someone said, you should write a newsletter about it. I'm like, wow, great idea. So I created the newsletter, and I would just write about whatever I read about that week, about what was going on with the internet. And then I would send it out. And it started off with a couple people in the news groups. And within a short period of time, I had 20,000 subscribers all opt in to this newsletter. Wow. And then I said, you know what? In the newspaper, you can put a classified ad in there for like $10 a line. So I said, I'll do that on my newsletter. Maybe I'll make a few bucks. So $10 per line, minimum 3 lines. And started making $1,000 a week on a part-time basis.
That's cool.
And I mean, I remember writing an article about how when Yahoo came to the scene a little bit later on, how they announced their 10,000th link, a website addressed in their database.
Yeah.
And SEO back then was so easy. You just had to have, it was all alphabetized. So there was no SEO rankings. So if you wanted to be SEO, you just had to have you'd start with a 1 or something like that to be top of the list. Very, very early days stuff. A lot of fun. Wild West.
Yeah, that's a great story. So you started doing the magazine. That was obviously pretty successful. What next? What did you do after that?
Well, one of my subscribers said, "Hey, this web is out. You should start up a web mall." So I'm like, you know what? Why not? So I actually sent. Yeah, because back then that's what you did. You went to a mall and they had these little mini sites hosted where you can buy stuff.
Yeah.
So I had this idea of how to put this whole thing together. So I sent out an email, and it was the most ridiculous marketing message you could ever send to your clients. So all my readers, I said, look, I don't know anything about the web yet, because it was 94 going into 95, where the web browser had just come out. Mm-hmm. In fact, my first version was 0.93 alpha of Netscape, going way back. And we decided to, I sent out a message that said, look, I'm not sure exactly what I'm doing, but I'm going to build a web mall. I'll build you a store. I'll host it for 3 months, and here's your price. It was $150 for a store. And if it sounds interesting, here's the order form. Send me a check.
Yeah.
And I got 75 checks in that first couple of days.
Oh, my gosh. Wait, and these stores so they would put their products on there and or services? What was typically displayed in the store? And they're obviously just images, right? There wasn't a transaction process or anything, was there?
No, there was contact us once. Yeah. So you had basically, I would take a logo, I would take some inventory pictures that they had to put it up there, depending if they had something unique, and a contact us form if they were interested in making an order, or a phone number so they can pick up and just call. Mm-hmm. And I had my most successful store. I laugh about this. I actually had 2 very successful stores. One of the stores was vacuum cleaner bags out of Henderson, Virginia. And he was doing orders left and right out of that store for whatever reason. They just did really well. And then I had a local client to where we were, sign up for us. And it was funny. I was in Vegas and I picked up a product, and it was their company name, which was called Kiss My Face. It was not cosmetic company, but more like skin lotions and stuff like that.
Yeah. And
they're still around today.
What was the product in the other store?
The vacuum cleaner bags.
The vacuum cleaner bags.
Yeah, because nowadays most vacuums don't have bags. They're all
right.
magnets.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But back then, you needed bags.
Yeah, I know. It's just so funny why those did so well. And so people would go online, they'd find your mall, and they'd see the different stores in there, and they'd call an order. Wow, so futuristic.
And it's funny, talk about futuristic. I got written up in one of the magazines that were online at the time for having one of the first motion graphics on the internet. I had this idea. If you remember the old show Happy Days?
Yeah.
And at the beginning of the diner has that big neon sign that just kind of spins around.
Yeah.
So I said, I want to do that for the mall. I want to really make it different. So I took the image and I made it in, 6 or 7 different positions. And then I used the CGI technology that I wrote to push and replace that image. And it was slow and clunky, but it did have the effect of it spinning around. That said First Street Mall, and it was just kind of spinning around there.
Oh my gosh. How long did it take for that to load?
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's amazing.
On a 14.4 modem back in the day, it took took a while.
Oh my gosh, that's great. Okay, so you did the malls for a little bit. That sounds relatively pretty successful as well. Then what?
That mall actually turned into one of the fastest ISPs on the East Coast when the 56K technology had come out, where you can do 56K baud back and forth. And that meant you can literally download 1 meg of data in under 10 minutes. Just to give you an example of the speed.
Oh, yeah.
But we were the first company to have. In fact, my modem racks were from US Robotics, and the rack modems had serial number 8. I mean, they were one of the first racks coming out of US Robotics. So we had an ISP for a period of time, which I later sold to another company when the cable modems came out, because there was no way I can retool in time. And then I bounced over to, met up with somebody, and we started up a company called paidforsurf.com, which was one of these companies where we would put a little application on your desktop, which would just flip through banners, and you got paid for the amount of hours you spent online with that application running. And then, of course, if you referred other people to the business, it was kind of like a multi-level marketing thing. You'd get paid for the people that you referred and the people that they referred.
Wow.
We launched that on December 19th of 2000. Of 1999. And 5 months did our first $1 million in business.
Get out of here! And you were getting, and where was the revenue coming from? The advertiser or
advertisers? They would literally pay. There was advertising networks and direct advertisers that would literally pay to be up on that banner because it was in front of real people. We controlled the application, so there's no fraud at the time because the way it was set up. Now, of course, people try to defraud it using mechanical mechanisms to kind of move the mouse or keyboard, and we had stuff in there on our technology to prevent that, but it was still, people would try to defraud that. So there was an article written up in Wired magazine about companies like us who have this technology and who have anti-fraud technology to prevent people from, and they had a little, those little chickens that they dip down in the water and they pop up and they keep going up and down.
Yeah.
They were showing people using stuff like that to touch a key on the keyboard, so it looked like that they were active, so that their banner would play when they're off to class or something like that.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
We had anti-fraud stuff in there to prevent people from tricking those softwares out. And we had, I think, our biggest client was somebody who gamed a lot in college, and they would run it all the time when they were running, and referred so much business to us, and they were making something like $1,800 a month.
Oh, that's great. That is so good. So then, go ahead.
Yeah, when we closed that down, we had just over 1 million subscribers to the service.
So what was the reason for shutting it down?
.com bubble burst.
Yeah.
We had
2003, I guess.
That was 2000.
Right around
2000,
there.
right? September. Because I was April 14th of 2000, because 3 months after we started, we had a contract to sell the company for $60 million. So I'm 28 years old, typical .com success story. Yeah. And April 14th was the day, April 28th was the day we were supposed to close the deal. And by the time we got everybody organized, April 14th, the .com had busted and everything tanked. And then, of course, the deal came off the table.
Yeah. Oh, what a bummer. Well, so then you go, you're doing a couple different things, right? You're running First Street Corporation, and then you're also starting Ad Origin Corp.
Ad Origin was the next one in line. My buddy actually started that company, and they couldn't get it off the ground, so I came in and did sales and earned my partnership inside of 3 months. And we grew that to a point. A couple years later, I actually developed my first fraud solution inside that company called Click Defender. And it was extremely basic at the time, but it was very, very effective at the time. And we had that company sold. At the time, it was sold for $35 million, all cash. And we had two brothers that were part of the company that fought about everything and kind of scared away the bank, scared away the buyer, and then that company just kind of fell apart.
And what did that company do? Was it you said you had a sort of a fraud tool. So were you doing search, or what exactly were you?
It was We did basic display units, but we also did search. We had a search engine in there called Below Search.
Oh, okay.
And we used to heavily filter the traffic. In fact, we had gotten written up in Cranes, New York one time for doing such a great job that Google should be doing, the writer wrote Google should be doing something like what Below Search does for their fraud detection. So we started to get get eyes to look on it, the right eyes to look on it. But when the partnership fell apart, I left and started Ezanga.
Okay, so Ezanga. Now we're getting close. We're getting up to speed. So you got Ezanga. That was 16 years ago, and it's still going strong. And tell us a little bit about Ezanga.
Well, Ezanga started off literally as a contest search engine, and we had a nice following. We had 30, 40,000 people that were growing, and literally, if you visited the site once in a day, you got a basically an entry into the giveaway hat, and we give away $1,000 a month, nothing crazy. Yeah. But every time we gave out cash, we give out T-shirts and everything else that went with it. People would actually refer a lot more business, and it would grow. So every month that we sent out checks, we'd see that nice little growth, and we were doing something decent with it. But I said, you know what? I can do some marketing because I know marketing at this point. I've done a bunch of marketing. Let me go out and take some of the money that we're bringing in and do some marketing campaigns. And as soon as I started buying traffic, I noticed fraud. So I began building what Anura is today, but I began building my first enterprise class level of fraud detection. So I started doing everything on paper, mapping everything out. Then it became a spreadsheet. I would run the spreadsheet. And when the spreadsheet took over 30 minutes to run, I moved it to a full database and just progressively grew it. But what was neat about it is as soon as I put it together and it started working, we started seeing bigger profits because we're actually eliminating the garbage that we were trying to buy from other vendors and being able to get credits from them in order to not pay for fraud. Yeah. So we had started growing that, and I said, this would be great. Rather than me doing this kind of after the fact and managing campaigns, if we can get traffic, pre-filter it, and sell the pre-filtered traffic to our advertisers at Ezanga, this would be a solid business plan. And we did that. And 2 years later, we became one of the fastest growing companies in the U.S. We thought it was just because it was Ezanga and it was the type of model we were building, but it was really because we were filtering out the fraud. People were getting quality traffic, and they had better performance with us than our competitors. So we started growing fast, and we started taking into account conversion data from some of our bigger clients would give us real-time conversion data so we can confirm that the algorithms and the rules and the heuristics we were building were just not made up in our head. They were actually benchmarked against performance-based campaigns. Right. And that was kind of key for us, and we've done that now for 14 years, building and managing and optimizing this network or this algorithm to continually grow and build what we have today. So inside of Ezanga, we called that product Traffic Advisors. That actually got named by a good friend of mine back in the day. He said we did such a great job that we were catching stuff faster than his team. So they called us the unofficial traffic advisors of their company. And that's kind of stuck. Yeah. But when we decided to separate it because we started getting a lot of requests from clients, hey, I'd love buying traffic from you guys, but I need to buy it elsewhere because you don't have all the traffic I need. Right. I would like to license your fraud technology outside of Ezanga. And at the time, we were like, well, no, if you want the traffic, just come buy it from us. But again, we do have limits in the amount of traffic that we have access to. So we decided to spin it off into its own company, and we wanted to give it a different name because Traffic Advisors became synonymous with our publisher platform. So we decided to give it a name of Anura and spin it up as its own company. Great.
Well, let me just before we get into Anura, back to Ezanga, what type of clients do you guys have today? Is it is it all over the map, or are there specific areas that you guys really seem to focus on?
We're all over the map, but I think our biggest focus seems to be with home services, landing pages with phone numbers where, because there's a lot of robocalls going on in the space. And what happens is, we'll talk a little bit about that with fraud, but essentially human fraud farms go to people's landing pages, because they know they have to generate a phone call in order to validate all the marketing, whether it's clicks or impressions or anything else. They'll literally go to the page, grab the number, and they'll use sophisticated tactics to hide themselves. They'll get the phone number and they'll plug it into a robodialer and make that phone call, let it last for at least 2 or 3 minutes, and they can use avatars or anything they want or dead air, depending on the client on the other end, just so it looks like a real call.
Right.
The only way you're going to know it's not a real call is if you sit and listen to the calls. Well, we know before they even grab that phone number if it's a real person or if it's bogus or if it's a human fraud farm. So we can indicate to that individual, stop, don't let this phone number be exposed to them. But those type of campaigns also do very well on our network because it's clean traffic. So we know the calls that are happening are legitimate calls. Mm-hmm. That's a good chunk of our network. We have people who are looking launch a new product. I'll give an example. We have a bunch of the cable stations will launch new shows, and then we have a bunch of relationships where they'll come to us and say, I need 500,000 visitors over the course of a week to get some eyeballs on this and start building up, Twitter and, the social stuff. And so they can grow it that way. So we get a lot of those, especially with launches of new shows. We'll be able to do a bunch of that type of advertising. For some reason, we have a lot of auto dealerships.
Oh, yeah.
So they spend a ton of money on marketing, and they have agencies, and agencies have come to us over the years and probably been dealing with a couple of those agencies for 10 plus years. Been very happy with the traffic, and usually the only thing they demand is more.
Right. Yeah. No, auto dealerships are really getting their act together too these days. I mean, they're understanding the online space, the inbound sales calls and the outbound sales calls, and not everybody's walking into the dealership anymore, right? A lot of stuff's being done over the phone and online, and that's a landscape that's really changed over the last 10 years, or so, and continues to evolve. So not surprised to hear that. With and along those same lines, I mean, there's more and more calls, right? More and more people are sort of wanting those inbound calls. And then subsequently that means there's more opportunities for these examples of fraud that you sort of just mentioned, whether it's click to call or whatever it is, right? Are you seeing more and more of that out there right now with regards to calls?
I'm seeing, because I'm talking to a couple of companies now, and they're running into that situation where they're getting a lot of dead air or complaints. Yeah. The biggest problem is a lot of these are agencies, so they're driving traffic or driving these calls to clients. And let's face it, no one has the time to listen to all these calls. They're generating thousands of calls a day. Yeah. And AI listening to the calls can only do so much, especially if they're using a good avatar. It's almost impossible to pick up that it's not real. Mm-hmm. That's the old question, is it real or Memorex, right? Right. So our technology can pick up on that, eliminate that, because the last thing you want is a client calling you out for fraudulent calls, leads, clicks, impressions, whatever. So as an agency, you have to be on top. You have to be on your A game. You have to make sure that what you're sending to your client, what you're selling, you stand behind. And that's where fraud solutions come into play. Yeah.
So, what kind of what are you guys seeing out there right now with fraud? I mean, we just sort of rattled off, 20, almost 30 years worth of experience, and you sort of seeing all the different types of fraud and what's really happening out there. What's sort of the state of fraud, I guess you would say, today, and how it's sort of, trending? What are you kind of seeing just from an overview perspective?
It's on the rise. Yeah. Let's face it. If you pay someone to do something, they will find a way to cheat it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have examples from history of all the different, I'll give you a quick example. PayPal came up with this idea way back when to get their start, that if you referred somebody who opened up an account on their system, they would give you $5. Now, it doesn't take a rocket science to realize how fast, when we're talking about fraud, initially it sounds like a great idea. Look, I'm going to refer somebody and get $5. But this one enterprising 18-year-old kid decided to take advantage of that $5 and do one of these pyramid schemes. So he built this software to track it and said, I'm going to sign you up. And then what's going to happen is when you sign up your first person, They're going to pay you $5. You're going to pay me $1. You're going to pay the guy above me $1, and pay the guy above $1, and you keep $1 yourself.
Yeah.
And the software would track all this. And PayPal didn't realize what was going on until he had already stolen $1.5 million.
Wow. But yeah, I mean, especially something simple like referrals, you don't even think about it from a marketing perspective. But there's always some way to, scam the system. So it's on the rise.
People are constantly looking for ways to cheat the system. So right now, a lot of traffic is bought through display advertising, which is impression based. So what a lot of times happens is, think of it this way. So sometimes when you look at a form or an e-commerce transaction, if you pay someone to create an e-commerce transaction or fill out a form, it's obvious where the fraud's coming from. They're filling out those forms fraudulently to get paid. Mm-hmm. But if you look at it, people want to know, okay, well, I buy my advertising through programmatic. So why would they fill out a bogus form? So people don't understand the gravy train, how that works, but it's pretty simple. You pay for ad impressions. The fraudster is getting paid because he's generating those fraudulent ad impressions. Now, any smart, actually, you don't have to be smart, any campaign manager or programmatic system is going to realize that if you show so many impressions and no clicks, cut off that source.
Yeah. So
they're smart enough to say, okay, I got to send clicks, so I got to generate false clicks in order to keep my revenue stream from the programmatic alive. Mm-hmm. And they know if they click too little, click too much, it's no good. They know right where the sweet spot is for every vertical, and they stick to it. Next thing is, campaign manager or programmatic is going to realize if you do so many clicks and don't generate any back-end conversions, whether it's a lead or e-commerce transaction, shut off the source. Right. So they have to go down and fill out a form or use a stolen credit card to do an e-commerce transaction to keep their gravy train alive. And that's where it becomes an issue. So a lot of people, for example, lead generation, right? We're in the lead generation world. Everybody wants to know, I'm going to show you how to save 15% on your auto insurance, right? So they want to collect people's information. So when they come to these forms, they know that people use all kinds of tools to protect them from lead generation fraud. So they'll record the screen so they can see if the person is typing or pasting. Mm-hmm. They validate all this information to make sure the person's real. But what's happening is, and they also validate the information that's submitted is real. So what these fraudsters do at a sophisticated level is they use programming hacks to make it look like they're coming from a different place than they are. They spoof their environment and make it random, so it looks like, one lead gets filled out by a desktop, next one's by a phone, next one's from Safari, next one's from Firefox, and they scramble it so that it's not easy to identify. And then they use stolen information to fill out the form, so it's real information, but at the end of the day, it's the person's information that's being filled in did not fill out that form. So now, all they're doing this is to try to keep their income coming in. But now where it really gets hurt is the brand who picks up the phone and calls that bogus lead.
Right.
Because you have, first off, the person's going to want to know, where did you get my information? So they're worried about brand reputation. So your reputation could be harnessed if you call enough people and they get upset that you're calling them. How'd you get their information?
Oh, yeah.
Number two, that lead is never going to convert. So you're getting an overall watered down ROI. And if you were able to eliminate that, you'd be able to see an improved ROI. And number three, you are breaking TCPA compliance.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're calling somebody who didn't specifically give you the right to call them, the permission to call them. Now, even though you have the checkbox checked, if I'm a lawyer, I'm going to pull IP addresses and prove that it's not my client's IP. And you're going to lose.
Scary. So, okay, so they're going all the way through the funnel, and this isn't necessarily anything new, right? They've been doing this for years now with buying blocks of IPs, doing bots and clicks and all this sort of stuff, and then even filling out the form. If they're going all the way down that funnel, obviously there needs to be some way to find these guys. So how does that work when they're going through all these different steps?
It's what Anura has been doing for 14 years.
Yeah.
We have a very sophisticated system I think last time I checked, is a couple 100,000 lines of code. I mean, I wrote the first 3 versions back in early to mid 2000s, and I stopped at 150,000 lines of code before I handed it off to a team. So at this point, it's progressed into a very sophisticated code using a combination of machine learning and engineering oversight to make sure that what we're finding is legitimate. Like, for example, there's a lot of fraud solutions in the market.
Uh-huh.
And most of them use, when it comes to sophisticated fraud, will use a numerical scoring system. So anybody that uses a system is familiar with this. So in other words, they'll get a score back from, say, 0 to 100, or they'll each have a different type of scale.
Yeah.
But when they say, hey, a score came back of 70 or greater, that's indicative that it's fraud. And if you actually sit and read their documentation, because I used to be clients of all these guys for Izanga, I used to have to sign up for these third-party fraud solutions for clients specifically.
Uh-huh.
It says that if it scores, say, a 70 and above, it's 70% likely to be fraud. So it's a probability score. Or in some of the other companies, they'll say it's a confidence score, 70% confident that it's fraud.
Right.
What about the other 30%?
Right.
Therein lies why IAB not too long ago wrote an article that says of the accredited fraud solutions in the marketplace, there's a 30 to 40% discrepancy amongst fraud vendors because they're not looking at the same stuff. Yet with us, we don't give out a score of fraud unless we're 100% confident, and yet we still find 200 to 300% more fraud than our competitors. And we're the only fraud solution that we know of that when you use our fraud solution lines up with all the other vendors in the marketplace. There is no discrepancy when we filter it because we're catching everything that they're not looking for and everything that they are looking for.
Right. Wow. So what types of fraud are currently out there? We sort of touched on, click fraud there. But I've heard of ad stacking and click flooding, and I guess that's probably more appropriate for mobile apps. But what sort of seems to be the prevalent source of fraud these days?
It's kind of a mix of everything, and we see a lot of bots. Obviously, bots are generally simple to find and identify. And that's the term that everybody knows. Oh, I want to get rid of the bots. Well, there's good bots and bad bots. Like the Google bot is a good bot. It's going to index your site and make sure you get your highest ranking for SEO. Make sure your latest changes are up there. So that's a good bot. And then you have the bad bots that are clicking on ads and creating click fraud and all kinds of stuff. And the bots can be very sophisticated to the point that they're very difficult to identify. And they get past a lot of our competitors because of that. Then you have malware. So we were the company that 2 years ago found, I still have yet to find a bigger find in fraud in the marketplace, but an estimated $3 billion a year in ad fraud on Google's Play Store. We have that article posted on our website because our PR firm didn't do a great job of getting it out, although they did get us up on CNBC, wrote us a nice little article with a little bit of video on that. But essentially what it was thousands of apps all look the same. They were live wallpaper. So, these fancy little fish tanks and stuff like that, or your favorite football team and the logo, with some motion to it. So it was kind of a cool thing to have. And they were all very pretty looking, very nice. But as soon as your phone's screen turned off, went to sleep mode basically, 6 seconds later, it would turn on and start running through ads and video and all kinds of stuff. Jeez. And what would happen to the end user is your battery would drain. And if you were on a data plan, it would chew up your data plan and you wouldn't know what's going on. Meanwhile, all these companies were getting all this fraudulent traffic coming from millions of devices. Yet we caught it. We'd actually, on our report that we have, we even disclosed the code. We reverse engineered the malware and displayed the malware. So people can see what was going on the hood, who was really being targeted, all that kind of good stuff. So you got bots, malware, and then the more elusive human fraud. This is what affects most performance-based campaigns. And according to IAB's quarterly report last year on Q4, 60% of all marketing dollars go to performance-based campaigns, which has been a switch because usually it's mostly branding. but now it's starting to switch more and more to performance-based, which makes sense.
Yeah.
You want to know that you're getting some performance out of your marketing.
Yeah.
So for us, it's easy. When we sit down with a new client and they apply our technology, they immediately see a lift in performance because we're a performance-tuned solution.
So you were saying, what's the human side of it? So from the performance side, they're just going down the funnel and actually hiring people just to go through the form and have either a conversation or is that what you're alluding to? Or
yeah, the human fraud is typically, now they used to use human fraud. They used to call them click farms. They'd have a bunch of humans clicking on ads because there's no randomness to it. I mean, there's no repeatable action, so you can't tell it's a human doing it. It's a bot. But they were doing that. And, they're making pennies a click, 5, 10, 15 cents a click. Now they're going out and filling out one form by hand and making a lot of dollars on the back end because it takes, what's the cost per conversion? $15 a conversion. So one bogus transaction like that makes, legitimizes the rest of their business model, and they make a lot more. So they become a lot more profitable using humans to do the work. And what I've seen is I had some clients that come to me that said, I can actually see them copying and pasting the name and the information. I go, okay. And as soon as you start blocking those, what happened? He goes, it went away. I said, yeah, they stopped cutting and pasting right now. They're actually hand typing it in. And then, of course, we put the technology on their site and we're able to catch 15% of the forms being filled out by bogus people.
Wow, that is it's just crazy. I mean, because all these questions come up, right? Is when you're a lead buyer, you're going, man, I'm buying these leads and they're supposedly coming from this website that they just filled out the form, less than a minute ago, but 60% of them aren't even picking up the phone. Now, certainly there's people that just don't pick up the phone. Okay, no one,
sure.
that happens, but. The greater question is why isn't there more intent from somebody that filled out a form less than a couple minutes ago? And that comes from even the most legitimate, quote unquote, lead sources, that could be coming from, but still you get a certain level of performance. Now, is that all fraud related? Maybe not. I don't really know, but, those are the questions.
Yeah. You're going to have your natural fall off because someone fills out a form and then they fill out another form and somebody else calls them up and then it's like, I'm not going to deal with this company. I already got somebody else.
Yes.
And you're going to have a natural fall off. And I don't know. And it's probably different for every industry.
Yeah.
But when we start applying our fraud technology, we can clearly see which ones are real fill-in forms and which ones are bogus fill-in forms. And that is such an important thing especially for agencies. I mean, for brands, it's obvious because you're paying for fraud. You don't want to pay for fraud. You want to get rid of it. So our analytical dashboard will show them paint basically a bullseye on the back of where the fraud's coming from so they can stop buying it from their current vendor and maybe get credit back depending on the vendor. But with lead generation companies, the big problem there is they are selling these leads. And let's say we see an average of 25% fraud. It depends on where you're getting traffic. If you're getting it from, say, affiliates and from your network and from different things like that, you can be above 25%, well above 25%. And if you're getting stuff just strictly from like tier 1 search and stuff like that, you're going to be on the lower end of things. But we typically see an average of 25% fraud. So if you think of your client, if you're a lead generation company, you're selling these leads to a client's going to charge back on leads, which you don't want to hear about. That's the last thing you want, a client catching your pants down, basically. So what happens is you focus on getting rid of those leads proactively before it gets to the client. The client will see an increase in performance, and as soon as they see an increase in performance, there's going to be an increase in demand. And we see that constantly with companies that we work with, to the point that they're actually seeing their company growth start to accelerate because we're helping them get rid of the garbage before it makes it to a client. The client's happier and they want more.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So you guys are most of the clients just blocking it? So as soon as you're identifying it in real time to some extent and just stopping whatever that traction or the pixel firing or whatever it may be? Is that how this is happening?
It's very different Well, it's a variety of ways depending on the end client. Some clients, what they'll do is, as soon as the visitor lands on the page, everything we do is real time. As soon as we identify that it's a bad user, they send them to a 404 page, so it's off their resource. They don't waste any resources or anything else. Others will mark, let's say if it's a form, they'll mark the form as fraudulent form. And then some of them, this way they have that information. They don't get any duplicates coming through. They may make that part of their do not call list. Everybody does something a little bit different. In click world, everyone typically, if it's a 404, they won't let the click go through. Like if it's a bad user, they won't let it go through. They'll send it to a 404 because that's real-time clicks happening in real time. Leads are a little different. E-commerce, we protect people with, do a lot of e-commerce. And before the credit card gets charged, they'll query us to say, is this a real person or not? And we're catching stuff that their normal tools are not catching.
Are there thousands of these guys out there just doing a lot of little fraud, or there's some big guys, or do you even know, like, how many? Can you guys sort of identify?
I'm sure there's a couple syndicates.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to know. Point me in the direction of the fraud guys. And unfortunately, first off, what people don't realize is there's no law against ad fraud.
Yeah.
So think of it as, back in the day, if you wanted to be a thief, you would go do a stick up and hold up a coach and grab the gold off the coach, right? Again, illegal. Then you would go to the banks. They would rob banks or convenience stores or whatever, depending on how much money they're looking to get. And they would always find the different loopholes, like, okay, now they have cameras, how to get around cameras. And it was just a constant battle. Then it got to the point where, you know what, I'm just going to stick somebody who's intelligent on a computer, pop the firewall, go behind, and transfer money to the Cayman Islands, and steal that way. Again, still illegal. Well, now you got this level of fraud that's billions of dollars in fraud a year, and no laws against it.
There's not a single law against it?
Nope.
Wow.
Now,
you would assume there's something.
You'll get them on other things like money laundering or evasion of taxes or something else, but there's no law in the books that says ad fraud is illegal, at least none that I've seen yet. So if you have this way of stealing, which is billions of dollars a year being stolen this way with no laws against it, how do you stop it? Not that a law is going to stop it, but how do you prosecute somebody when you do find them? So what's happened in the past is they'll take their machines, they'll confiscate their computers, they'll shut them down in other ways, but there's literally no law against it.
Yeah, well, it's just contractual, litigation, right, as well. So, if someone's breaking, contracts, but that's not going to stop the fraudster from just doing it somewhere else, or shutting down the store and going somewhere else and doing the same thing.
So what we'll see like a center, let's see, and we've caught stuff like this before, where you'll have a group of people that run this fraud ring, and then they'll have dozens of point guys or front men in the field that you'll be able to walk up to a trade show and say hello to. That person is part of a fraud ring. They don't even know it. They think the traffic they're getting is clean and everything's working great, and their job is to deal with the advertisers and the networks to get the money. Meanwhile, if they get shut down, the main center hub has access to dozens and dozens of other front men. So there are groups like that. We've seen that before. And then, of course, there's a lot of individuals that, hey, I've got an idea. I'm going to do a drive-by install and redirect, their traffic through my payment codes so I can get paid. And there's dozens of them. And there's tons of people like that. So it's a big mix. it's just a lot of money, no laws against it, and it just takes some technical skill to know what you're doing to be able to pull it off. People do it.
Yeah, it is amazing, and I'm fascinated by it, and just to hear everything that's kind of going on out there. But I just love hearing companies like yours that is out there fighting against this fraud and helping with improving performance and all that sort of stuff. So you've got it's an Anura.io. It's ANURA.io. And people can go and check out that article you're referencing as well. And then probably the best way to get a hold of you if they had other questions is going through the website, the phone number or contact form.
Yep. The number is right on the main website. Contact form is up there as well. So however whatever's easiest to get in touch with us, we're here. Our main direct number here is 337-0641. And we're here Monday through Friday from 8 to 6.
Yeah, because I gotta imagine people listening to this that if they're driving traffic or if they're doing anything online with leads and having these types of issues, that they'll wanna find out more about this and talk with you about it and figure out how to resolve it. I was gonna say that's the biggest thing most people have is how much fraud do I have? Yeah, no idea. They have no idea.
I always tell them, are you ready to peek under the carpet? Because we do a free trial so they can actually test it themselves to see for themselves how much fraud they have. Because let's face it, if they have no fraud, they'd be the first. But if they have no fraud, there's no reason to use a fraud solution. Right. But if they have fraud, then we can talk about how to use that data to increase your volume while decreasing your fraud and growing your network.
Got it. Well, I'd encourage them to reach out to you. With your amount of experience, I can't imagine there's anybody else, providing services with the amount of experience you have. And I appreciate you hopping on. I've already kept you for longer than I promised I'd keep you, but I really thank you for hopping on this podcast and sharing about it. And we'll maybe bring you back and we can do an update and see what else is going on maybe in 4 or 5 months and see what trends you're seeing in 2019 and going into 2020. I think people are always interested in hearing these things because you, like you said, you don't know until you know, and by learning about this sort of stuff really piques a lot of interest and it gets people looking under, like you said, the carpet and seeing what's under there. So I love it. And I appreciate it, Rich, for joining. And like I said, anybody listening, check out Anura.io. That's ANURA.io. And if you have any more questions, go from there. But no, thank you, Rich. I appreciate it.
Appreciate the time. Thanks again.
And thank you all for listening to this episode of Lead Generation World Podcast. For more information about the podcast, to reach out to me, or to find out more about our January 2020 event, please go to leadgenerationworld.com. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.